today we're going to start out basically like we did last year. I even did this in the beginning where I wanted to go back or start at a certain point in history. We all know how complex politics in Europe is. Not not England. We don't include the island as a part of that. Today I slid it in with the Scots because last year we really didn't cover the Scottish too much. You know what I mean with England. So
Okay.
I did include them this year into it. Um, I usually wouldn't include the Scottish into anything pertaining to Europe, but this time I'll you see that's what I'm saying.
Are you sure you haven't got a tab open or something?
It's coming from you.
No. Ah, could have been
You see that? You got
D
some.
Live.
Got
Yeah,
some.
I did. I had D Live open without it being muted.
Somebody singing the gospel to you and stuff. Oh my goodness!
Oh God, too many tabs.
Too many
Too many
tabs.
tabs.
But this year I am going to be talking about now just on liberalism. I wanted to start out going over a couple things we missed last year on John Locke. I think we lost or missed some stuff on John Locke, and then after that, I would really like to get into Baruch Spinoza. He's another person who is involved with uh, classic liberalism. He's a Dutch philosopher. Then after that, we got Hugo Grotius, another Dutch philosopher. I didn't realize how many Dutch were actually involved in this stuff. And it was weird to me too because that's where John Locke eventually was exiled to. You know,
Weirdly, your list, you got something like 12 names there, and I can only think of 6 of them.
hmm
7 of
Montesquieu.
them.
Montesquieu was a French aristocrat, so we're going to
Um,
cover him and Voltaire.
mm,
Voltaire was more he was more abstract. You know what I mean? More than anything else, in my opinion. Um, but he was very important. Then we're going to go. I'm thinking we'll probably make it to Jean-Baptiste right now.
just as a point, Montesquieu.
Yeah.
You mean Charles Louis de Sacondat, Baron the Baron of Montesquieu, 1689 to 1755.
Now, now when it comes to Montesquieu, I believe he was in the same time period as
Thought so. Yeah, I think so.
Voltaire. I believe it was. Now,
1694. Yeah, 5 years older.
yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get to him, though, let's get started with John Locke. Now, just I know we said this last year. It's not a bad thing to say it as many times as possible so that people understand when it comes to John Locke. John Locke is important when it comes to politics and classical liberalism because he's considered pretty much the 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 father of freaking classical liberalism. You know, liberal thought basically. Um, and there were other, thinkers, I guess you could say, and political uh, philosophers that were involved in it as well. But
Ar- Around the Renaissance time. So, you could go and argue back to Greek philosophy. But yeah, during the Renaissance.
well, there's something that's a little bit different about it because, like, even like when it comes to Greek, there's especially with natural law. You know what I mean? Whenever, because that's the one thing that a lot of liberal thought is based off of is natural law. And when it comes to the ancients' belief of liberalism compared to what we had in the Renaissance up until now, they are pretty different, because distinct, I guess you could say, because of that concept of natural law and what it was. You know what I mean? And I also think that's one reason why it's important to go through classic liberalism, because it really did change the way we thought about government. I mean, I don't think anybody disagrees with that fact. Maybe
Yeah, yeah.
maybe you did.
No, no, no. The basis of Western, well, I'd say basis of our entire world political system these days, based
Yeah.
on the Smith and Locke arguments.
Mhm. Like I know the biggest things that was important was natural rights. And then you had limited government, which is something I really think is important even today. And let me also point out, like, we can talk about like current events as long as they pertain to what we talk about. You know what I mean? So like, just don't make it all crazy and stuff. You know what I mean? So, well, you know what I'm talking about.
As if I would.
Well, I know. Well, I don't know. After doing Untethered with you, you got a little bowdy on me. So you turned into a beast.
Only when necessary.
Hmm. Now, what I was saying though is like what it basically consists of is like natural rights. Then you had limited government. Then the rule of law. You had individual liberties. You had property rights. And I did find information out about property rights in England, by the way. So that's something that I'll talk to you about here in a second. And then free markets. That was another big deal.
Hmm.
So there was that going on. And if I remember correctly from last year, free markets was also important to the conservatives during that time period, wasn't it?
Yeah, uh, the laissez-faire sort of concept. Really, that has been destroyed only within the last 30 odd years,
Mm-hmm.
with the advent of Blairism.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about back then,
Mm,
though. I'm talking about back during like the 17th, 18th.
yeah, 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 yeah. But I'm just saying, even in Thatcher's time,
Mm-hmm.
um, free markets were a talking point.
Well, I mean, it was like you had the Tories, and then the Conservatives broke away from the Tories, and that was their big issue. It was the free market. They wanted a open trade kind of deal going on, I believe, is what we were discussing. It's been a while,
Mm.
so I kind of it kind of all gets foggy there. But I know we went over that, so I know it was a big issue with the conservatives back then too. So, but it is a situation here when it comes to the liberals and everything, the classic liberals. Now, the thing that I'm not really sure if we went over this, and if we did, I'm pretty sure it was just a very, very small amount of time that we talked about it. But it was John Locke's exile. Um, Now, a lot of people don't really know if they talk about John Locke, but well, I don't know if they know or if they just don't think it's important, you know. But John Locke was actually exiled from England because of a lot of political turmoil that was taking place in England at the time. Um, Now, he before he got really caught up into what we call classical liberalism today, he was actually caught up in a couple of issues that was going on in England at the time, and there was a tension over religious conflict, and it had to do with King Charles II, and later King James the, I think what King James II, wasn't that who it was?
First, second, I think.
Yeah.
If I remember my timeline.
Now, King James II was a Catholic, and it caused a lot of controversy because there were people that were against the Catholic taking the throne and um, protecting Protestant rights. I believe is what the whole deal was over.
Yeah, but this also stretches back to Henry VIII and Elizabeth I.
Right. But see, at this point, there was a king that would be the successor to the throne. You know what I mean? It's like this was this was a threat to them because they didn't want it to go to absolute monarchy like it was before. So it became a real big issue there, and the thing is like at the time, John Locke was associated with a guy who was the Earl of Shaftesbury, I guess. His name was Anthony Ashley Cooper. Now, Anthony Ashley Cooper, have you heard of him before?
That name just ring a bell. Yeah.
Okay, now Tan says he wasn't a Catholic; he was a lifelong Protestant.
Hmm.
So let's go ahead and find out as we go through this if he was really a Protestant. So Anthony Ashley Cooper was a powerful politician. He supported the restoration of the monarchy after freaking the revolution. But then he began to criticize the monarchy's authoritarian tendencies afterwards. You know what I mean? So like he actually did agree with the idea of returning the monarchy into power after Cromwell because of Cromwell's tyrannical rule and everything. But he started he did have issues when it came to the tendencies. He just didn't agree with absolute monarchy, and he believed that the king should rule with like limits that were defined by the parliament and by law, basically. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking Parliament and Constitution, but I'm not sure if it's actually constitutional. The Constitution question is a interesting one when it comes to this.
Well, he was against like religious persecution and unjust taxation. But there was one thing he was also against, which was arbitrary imprisonment. Um, so that probably was like what are they, debtor's prison, I guess, during that time period would be a good.
Bit later.
Because I know you guys were really big on putting people.
Yeah, but we're talking more Victorian period, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, no, this is during the 1700s, I believe.
Yeah, I was just looking at the habeas corpus Act, and that was 1679.
Hmm. Yeah. So now he was when it comes to religious tolerance, he was one of the earliest ones that vocalized religious tolerance. But his whole perspective was more towards the Protestant sects. You know what I mean? So it really wasn't like he wasn't open to all religious tolerance. It was just when it came to like the Protestants and having more rights and everything for the Protestants. So
But like I said, this sort of stretches back to a good 100, 200 years beforehand because of Henry VIII.
yeah. Now, where all of that fits together is Locke served as physician. He was also the secretary and advisor to freaking Ashley Cooper, and he was drawn into like his political circle, and they were all advocating for constitutional limits on royal power and stuff. So they wanted the parliament. They wanted the rule of law, and they wanted limited power for the king. And he kind of got sucked into it. Um, and actually, it was during later years after Charles II's reign um, that everything ended up getting a little bit more crazier. And that was because of an incident that happened called the Popish Plot. It caused the hysteria. And then after that, there was the exclusion crisis. Have you ever heard anything about the Popish Plot?
Again, it rings a bell, but yeah, he mentioned a lot of these things, and things that I haven't heard for a long time, and you should have given me some notes beforehand, really.
I'd give you some cheat sheets.
yeah. It reminds me of something, but yeah.
Now the Popish, you don't need them. I'll tell you the answers. It's all good. So now the Popish Plot, it was a fabricated conspiracy, and what it was well, this is during the 17th century, okay, and there was it began with a guy by the name of Titus Otis. He invented it. You ever hear of Titus Otis?
Yeah, indeed.
Titus Oates. Now he came up with a claim that freaking there was a secret plan by Jesuits and the Catholics to assassinate King Charles II and replace him with his Catholic brother, who is James, the Duke of York. So that got started, and it created a hysteria, and people started freaking out because they didn't like the idea of, first of all, them assassinating their king, and then second, replacing them with a Catholic on top of it. So things kind of got a little crazy there. You know what I mean? So That's basically the foppish plot. Does that ring any bells?
Sort of. Again, um, it's been a long time since I looked into into that subject. A long time.
Now the exclusion crisis. It was basically a political struggle that was taking place in England. That took place in the later years of King Charles, and it was like a period of 7 years, and it began like in the 1670s, the 1670s, and then it continued on until like the 1680s. Now, have you ever heard of the exclusion crisis?
Again, it's one the entire subject is something I've not heard for a long time.
Well, we have to go over this because we have to convince Tanhai Tran that King James, Duke of York, was indeed Catholic.
Remember, you say 1670s. King James II didn't come to power until 1685.
Right after King.
Yeah, Charles II, 1660 to 1685. 1685.
Right. Now, the whole thing of it was is the whole issue was whether James, Duke of York, would would or should be allowed to succeed King Charles II. Okay, on the throne, despite being a Roman Catholic.
Hmm.
So that's where a lot of that came from, and then, like I said, Oates he came up with the conspiracy that they were going to assassinate um, King James and replace him with with I just said that backwards, didn't I? Charles. They were going to assassinate King Charles and replace him with James. I believe is what I was going to say, and that created a lot of tension too. I'm pretty sure, you know what I mean. After
Just an interesting minor point. Charles II lasted for what, 25 years? James II only lasted 3 years.
well, there was a reason for that, though.
4 years.
You know, there was a reason for that. Like the thing of it was, is they were terrified that if he got put back in place, that if Catholics took power in England, that they were going to restore absolute monarchy, which the Holy Roman Empire was big on. You know what I mean? It was like it was absolute and total monarchy. You know what I mean? There was no constitutional government or anything like that during that time period. And I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding the difference in time periods. You know, like
Well, arguably, you could argue that sticking a monarch back into power is just a backdoor for the Catholic. In this period, it was a backdoor for the Catholic Church, for the Roman Catholic Church to use the king as a puppet.
hmm which that's all they ever were when it came to the Holy Roman Empire. You know what I mean? Because you had the Holy Roman what was it? The Emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, who
Yeah.
ruled over all of it, and then you had kings and fiefdoms and everything under him. So
And this sort of ceased to be with, like I said, Henry VIII.
hmm so this is basically is one of the earliest conflicts that emerged between factions when it came to the evolution of like the English monarchy that you guys know today. You know what I mean? Like before you had Henry VIII and everything, but like how you guys have a oh god, I'm messing up here. You guys have a parliament and you have a king. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
like this is like one of the first controversies that took place during that time period. Now, I don't know how true this is. I've been reading, and like some people say that it's true, some people say that it's not really fact, that people don't know. But according to some of them, they do say that Shaftesbury and his allies, including Locke or John Locke, did support excluding James from from being successor to the throne. Now I've checked it out and I've seen this split in a lot of different ways. You know what I mean? So I don't take that as 100%. It's like with other things that I've seen, like where they say that something was supposed to be here, and then there's another source saying no, we don't know where that place is. You know, I kind of don't really believe in it, but there are people who do believe Locke and Shaftenbury believed in. I'm just going to call him Shaftenbury. You know that they Shaftesbury, I believe. Yeah, that's the name of it, and that they did support excluding James from being the king. Um, Now, before I go on, I want to point out that right there in its own is considered, or during that time period would have been considered an act of treason. You know what I mean? Like they wouldn't have put up with that, by especially the royal loyalists. And after Cromwell, that's when people started becoming really loyal to the royal, to the royal family and stuff like that. So it created a backlash against everything that Cromwell and them had fought for because of Cromwell and becoming a tyrannical overlord of England.
Again, only for 5 years
Mm-hmm.
after the war.
Now, because of that, Shaftenbury he ended up falling from power. He was actually let go in his position because he did have a position when it came to politics. He was let go of that, and then later uh, they started looking towards ways of prosecuting, and that's when he turned around and he um, fled to Denmark, I believe it was. Now, when that happened, um, no, it was the Netherlands. Is where he did. He fled to. Now, after that happened, that's when the loyalists turned and looked at John Locke because they considered him guilty according to association. You know what I mean? Even though he wasn't in any of the rebellious stuff, he still was a part of this anti-royalist movement. So suspicion fell on him, and it drew attention to him by government agents, basically, and he ended up, having to flee too as well. He left England in 1683 because he was afraid he was going to be arrested. He ended up going to the Dutch Republic, and as you know, with Dutch, I mean, the Dutch has always had kind of like a fairly strong uh, liberal environment, I guess you could say.
Have
And
they
that,
always?
huh?
Have they always?
Oh yeah, that's where
Or is it modern then?
that was even where the pilgrims went. Uh,
Well,
there was a time where they left England and they went to the Dutch Republic, and then after they were allowed to travel over here to the United States or Americas during that time period, they came back to England just so they could jump on a ship and go to the colonies. But they've always had that liberal kind of attitude. Um, they had a well, even like religious tolerance and stuff, you know.
mm,
So that they were always pretty liberal about their ideas. Now, when he was there, um, he wrote he wrote his probably the most important book, and that's the one that I think people who are really interested in this should know. Um, the most important, I think, literature that anybody should learn when it comes to classic liberalism. It was written by John Locke. It's called The Two Treatises of Government. Now, if you get a hold of this, read it, and then you'll kind of get an idea of what and it all the time that he was there. Okay, he never finished the book. He didn't finish the book until later, after the Great Revolution, and that's when he finally returned back to England, and he actually had the book finished and got it published. But that's the book that you really want to look for. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book or not.
I did actually borrow a copy from a local library. Again, when I was in my 20s or something.
You never turned it back in, did you?
I know. Me? Of course I did.
I doubt it. Nobody returns a book to the library. They always get them. Well, they might do it a couple times, but there's going to be that time where you're going to just get lazy and say, you know what, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to keep these. And
No, maybe with the exception of one. I'm not owning up to any crimes there, but possibly with maybe the exception of one. I've always returned library books.
mhm, I don't believe you.
Well,
Now,
it is the pleading guilty.
when he wrote this book, uh, you got to understand he was trying to justify the resistance to tyranny. He was also defending natural rights, private property, and also consent of the governed. These were four very, very important things. And John Locke believed that natural rights were inherent to all human beings by virtue. Um, and that's because of their existence. You know what I mean? They weren't granted by any government or authority. You know what I'm saying? So that was whenever I talk about natural rights and natural law, that's basically what it consists of, and it's grounded in. You know what I mean? Um, and that's what he believed, and that's what you can see in a lot of the original constitutional governments. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people have this misconception that all of this started here in the United States, but it didn't. It kind of spurred out from all directions. I mean, I think every single government in Europe at that time period had a revolution and wanted constitutional government. There's only a few of them that didn't fall to it.
Well, this goes back further, doesn't it? Goes back to the Lutheran movement. So yeah, it's mainly a European thing, and like a lot of things from that happen in the Americas, it gets imported into.
Right. Now, now these rights that he's talking about, that Locke's talking about, he believed that they came from nature or reason, okay, and they were universal, meaning that they applied to all people in all societies, regardless of time or culture or anything. You know what I mean? That that everybody had natural rights that couldn't be taken away by any government or authority. It was something that you were naturally you had the rights to, and that's something that I found that is probably the most profound thing about constitutional governments and classic liberalism that you don't find even in the old ideals of the Greeks and stuff like that when it comes to democracies and things of that nature. Like they didn't believe in that. You know what I mean? They didn't believe that each individual had natural rights because like 2/3 of their freaking people were slaves, and like 1/3 of them were actually citizens and free men. You know,
Hmm.
so it's pretty interesting how that unfolded. That's the one unique thing about this, in my opinion. I really do think that that is probably something that sets constitutional governments apart from other forms of government, at least back then.
Hmm.
You know, so now John Locke believed in private property. He believed that it was a fundamental natural right that every individual uh, uh, should have the right to have properties. He actually believed that it was a natural right. You know what I mean? Um, that because I like how 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 his ideas of the right to private property is because he believed that uh, these natural rights to own property was inherent to everybody and that it existed uh, before even governments, you know what I'm saying, or authority. And I think that that's actually cool because it goes into saying like when you take a man who freaking stops wandering and he freaking starts tilling the land and working it, what he's doing is he's taking something natural and he's turning it into something that's kind of like a culmination between nature and human creation, basically. You know what I mean? He's creating something, you know. So you take a look at it like back when we were hunter gatherers, you know, and we decided to stop and actually start growing our own crops and building our own houses and making our own clothes and stuff of that nature. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's where he's going, and that's what he believed in when it came to uh, every person should have a right to own their own land. So I kind of really like that whole belief that he had right there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you that small government, the right to what's the old English British saying? A man's home is his castle. Um, but yeah, but as we have seen within recent decades, that idea is sort of dying, if not dead. Well, I won't say dead, but it's dying because of the expansion of government.
Hmm. And that is something else that he was against too. He was against the expansion of government. He actually believed in small government, you know. And what I was really trying to get at when it came to this whole thing about private property is like he believed that it came from nature, you know what I mean, itself. Like when it came, and it depended on the individual's labor, you know what I mean. Um, like a person turns around and he does his labor. What that's doing is it's mixing labor with the natural world. You know what I mean? So he's cultivating land, he's gathering his resources, and he's building shelters. He's making clothes. He's got everything right there, and that's basically what it basically is. You know, it's he's mixing his labor with the natural world. It's how you look. If you really look at it, that's really a very very simple way of looking at it. You know what I mean? That's the reason why these people should freaking be able to own private property. I mean, just for that fact alone. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's very for me. It's really pretty solid. You know, people transform something from like like uh, like from nature into something personally. You know what I mean? It's something they did from you know they did that on their own from their own labor. So, what's your thoughts on private property?
Um, that concept in itself, I've got a question because it suggests that everybody should be self-employed, everybody should own their own little plot of land, and everybody should be able to create. Is that really practical these days?
Yeah, it is. This is very practical. It allows you to have something that the government's not allowed to come in and try to control. You know what I mean? Like here in the United States, we have the right freaking like on the streets. If we're driving down the road, we have to have a driver's license. Okay, but I can drive any vehicle I want on my private property.
Same in the UK. I've got plenty of farms around there. Yeah, tractors and farm machines have to have a license one day on the road, but when they're in their own fields.
Mm-hmm. You know, and then you have to take a look at levying taxes. That's something that I find appalling with today's world because like um, well, especially when it okay, like I was talking about something when it comes to I did find something out about private property over in England. Okay.
Actually, just as a fair thought, I believe in laissez-faire and small market classical liberalism, but I also understand that there needs to be a limited amount of governmental regulation to protect the individual, to protect either the owner of the property or to protect the citizens that is related to. May that be purchasing a product from the owner or working or related to the owner. So yeah, there needs to be some sort of regulatory sort of body. I mean, after all, you do not want people to be committing fraud. You don't want individuals to be robbed of their life savings
Yeah.
because yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense, But like I'm talking about like on your actual property. Now, if you're like committing crimes and stuff on that property, I understand that would be justifiable for police to come on your property. You know what I mean? But even then, when they come on your property here, they have to have a warrant.
Mm.
They aren't allowed to just come on your property. You know what I mean? And that needs to be signed by the judge.
By
So,
court, not necessarily a judge. It has
no,
to be
yeah,
signed by a court. In the UK, and I think most of Europe, it has to be signed by an official of the court. Doesn't necessarily have to be a judge.
that's pretty messed up. See,
Could be a retainer of the judge.
mm-hmm. Well, like here with us, it has to be a judge. I mean, if it's not written or signed by the judge, then the warrant isn't isn't legit. You know what I mean? So that's
Mm.
kind that's kind of a big issue right there. Um, Now in the UK, when I did find out about private property, is actually this goes even back before classical liberalism. By the time John Locke came along and everything, the whole process was already being underlaid. At one time, England was like all the other countries, where you had the king, you had fiefdoms, and all of the land was owned by the king. But slowly, as time went on, um, more and more people were able to actually have land of their own. You know what I mean? So it was like a gradual thing that took place in England, which was interesting. I found that out, um, and eventually, by the time uh, the the Glorious Revolution, as they called it, or the Civil War, the English Civil War, was over, that's when private property and political power started becoming more clearly defined. So when that started happening, all of a sudden, like they started questioning things like the monarchy's attempts to like levy taxes or seize properties without the parliament's approval. So that started taking more. It started going more after that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Um, and I don't know. I mean, a lot of people says that actually helped strengthen the parliament, but I don't know if that really strengthened the parliament as much as it strengthened more of like individuals' rights. You know what I mean?
I would argue, especially looking at what's happening with farmers throughout Europe at this present moment, it strengthened Parliament's rights, might not strengthen individuals.
Well, I mean, do you guys have a lot of seizures of properties and stuff like that taking place?
Not that I heard of, but not directly. But with the recent inheritance rules in relation to farmers, if the farmers cannot afford to pay taxes, the specific inheritance tax upon death, then in theory the farms can be taken by the state.
Mm-hmm. See, that's the thing that whenever you look at the constitutional governments that were put in place and you look at it now, it seems like there is a force behind what's going on that's slowly trying to take away constitutional government. You know what I mean? And that's something that I really believe. Well, we'll get into that more because like I just wanted to start out where we're actually talking about like the original meanings to
Yeah.
these governments. You know what I'm saying? And not.
I mean, we can increase that argument to things like the European Union, European Commission, and the so-called globalization concepts.
Right. And it just, whenever you look at this stuff, this is the way Europe and, well, most of Europe and the UK and the United States, this is how our governments were supposed to be set up, you know. And I'm not even talking about the founding fathers here in the United States. I'm talking about Europeans who set these uh, ideas up and came up with them and believed in them. You know what I'm saying? This has absolutely nothing to do with the United States yet, which I think people fail to forget that, you know, or they seem to forget that. They fail to remember it, is what I should have said. So
Mm.
just wanted to put that out there and rub it in with a bit of salt so that people understand over there that they're taking away things that were given to you.
Were given to us. Okay, in that concept, yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Now, when
Yeah.
you got something.
Sorry. No, carry on.
Now, when James II took the throne in 1685, fears of absolutism and Catholic dominance increased. Now, Locke remained in exile throughout the whole period, and he was watching the tensions in England as they simmered and eventually boiled over. Okay. It wasn't until the glorious revolution of 1688 when James was deposed by William of Orange, or was deposed, and William of Orange took the throne with the support of Parliament. Then finally, after that, Locke returned to England. Um, the the revolution basically vindicated a lot of Locke's principles. And that included constitutional government, then religious tolerance, and religious tolerance for Protestants, basically, and the right of people to resist tyrannical rulers, I guess. Now, with that whole thing about deposing frickin' James, was he really that bad of a frickin' ruler? That's something I never did find out. Like, did he actually try to start uh, handing power back over to the Catholic Church?
Not that I can remember. Oh, no, not that I was there, obviously. But from my reading of, no.
No, I mean, so this was basically just fear of the Catholic Church taking power again, and it just escalated. Because I mean, that was something that I've never been able to really find clear stuff about. If anybody's got PDFs or information that can lead me in the right direction on that, I'd be more than willing to check it out, because that actually is pretty interesting. I've never found anything that showed if he was doing exactly what people were afraid he was going to do or not. It was really interesting. Okay, so now we have Baruch Spinoza. You want to talk about Baruch?
Okay, not a name that I recognise.
No, he was a Dutch philosopher in the 17th century, and he strongly influenced liberal thought through his arguments for freedom of thought, secular governance, and the role of reason in politics. So the thing that the like this whole freedom of thought thing, we we don't get too caught up in all that here in the United States. But secular governance is something that is something. It's the separation of government, religion, and state. You know what I mean?
You do have, well, arguably, First Amendment is related to freedom of thought.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like they don't really get too in depth in our Constitution about like
First Amendment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. Everything's pretty clear cut in it. You know what I mean? So, freedom of speech. It's
Freedom of speech, freedom of thought, same difference, really.
you can
And
think
then,
about it.
and this one of the very few things that the European Court of Human Rights have come on Article 10, freedom of expression.
Mhm.
One of the very few good things.
Now, Baruch Spinoza's political ideology concerning secular government, they were grounded in his belief that true political stability and human flourishing could only be achieved through the separation of religious authorities from civil government. And yes, I do agree with that. I know a lot of people today are raising hell over that thing. Like, we need to put God back in the government and everything. And that's just not the way the government here in the United States was ever meant to be.
Yeah, but the US concept of what is it? Divides, freedom, to God, and
Yeah, free,
going to.
right, exactly. But see, government and religion should never be put together. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, how many times have we heard US presidents? In fact, Trump did it not within last week. Mentioned God at the end of a speech.
well, mentioning
Uh,
them. I mean, he can. Anybody can mention them. That's no problem. That's not what they're saying.
but in relation to US ideals,
Oh yeah,
idealism.
yeah. Well, I mean, see, that's the thing that's so cool about constitutional government. You know what I mean? It's like you can have your opinions, you can say your opinions, whatever. If they're true or not, that's completely a different story. You know what I mean? So, yeah, just let him say what he wants to say. Let him believe what he wants to believe because that's the right that he's allowed to have. You know what I mean? And nobody has the right to take that away from him. It's like I on a censorship sucks chat or his comment or their comments on mines. There was a guy talking ridiculous stuff about believing in unicorns, and I turned around and I said, "Well, if you believe in unicorns, then you have a right to believe in unicorns, and I respect you for believing in them because that's the way you believe in, and nobody has a right to take that away from you." You know what I mean?
I hope it's the point of individual beliefs pushing or aiding to push political policies.
They shouldn't be there at all. There should never be any kind of religious policies in government whatsoever.
Well, aiding too. So, as a very basic example, thou shalt not murder.
Well, I mean, murder is murder. It's something that needs to be dealt with, don't you think?
Mm. No, I just from your perspective, I just wondered about the entire concept because you're talking about religion shouldn't really be part of politics, but Arguably, well, in reality, it is.
Well, natural law. We got to go back to the natural law thing. Okay, you take a real thou shalt not murder, which is religious, and you just take murder and you look at it on the natural law aspects of it. When it comes to creating a society with with harmony in it. Okay, now when you look at it naturally, not even thinking about God or thinking about any religion. Okay, do you think that murder is good?
On principle, no.
All right, so that's just the natural way that humans believe. Now if you think it's okay to murder, then you're gonna you got problems. You know what I'm saying? And you'll be properly cared for when it comes to constitutional law, because eventually we'll get into that. We'll get into the group conscience. According to our conscience. But
But I just want to go back to our last Untethered episode, because we were talking about the recent UK abortion changes to the Abortion Act and the upcoming assisted suicide bill. Yeah, it's currently a bill. Some people would argue that the change in the Abortion Act and the upcoming or the assisted suicide bill could be considered as a form of murder.
well, the whole thing with the issue of abortion and the issue of assisted suicide, I don't really believe that they should have ever been made any. That they should never have been a part of the federal government. I don't think. Now, if each state wants to do it to make laws of it, then that's fine. But I don't believe that it really should have been put into federal government at all in any way whatsoever.
I'm looking at it more from a UK sort of perspective, rather than a US federal sort of perspective. But yeah,
Well, when like here we had Wade. What is it? Wade versus Roe, or versus Wade.
yeah.
And it was overturned here recently. And the reason why I thought that was a good thing is because that should have never been a law in the first place. Just like even before that, when it comes to the government saying that abortion is illegal, that should have never been there either. The whole conversation about abortion should have never been a part of government. Period.
But who would regulate on that?
Nobody.
So people can just abort at any point whenever they want.
There's just some things that really shouldn't be regulated. Period. It's I have absolutely no right to go and tell a woman that what she can and can't do. When it comes to her body, it's just like freaking. How would you feel if they came out with a law that said that you had to have your stuff cut? You know what I mean? Get a vasectomy, and you didn't have a right to say that you could or couldn't do it. You know what I mean? It was just the law said you needed to get a vasectomy, and that was all there was to it. How would you feel about that?
There is a slight complication there because it can be argued that we are talking about a third person, the entity, the fetus, the child. a potential child.
Well, I mean, that right there is what I'm saying. Like, I just, there's just, especially here, see, our country, and unlike popular belief, our country was founded by conservative, not conservatives, we by classical liberalism. Okay, we weren't. Our country wasn't founded on conservative ideas. All right. Now, conservative ideas are what everybody really has this tendency of believing our government was founded on, and it wasn't. Constitutional government, when you look at the Constitution, what you're looking at is something that was freaking created because of classic liberalism. Conservatives didn't freaking have anything to do with constitutional governments whatsoever. Okay. So when you're listening to these conservatives and what they're saying, you're actually listening to something that is against the conservative thought or the classical liberal thought, against constitutional government. Okay, so you have to ask yourself. I mean, which form of government do you agree with? Do you agree with the conservatives, or do you agree with classical liberalism and constitutional government? Because you got to understand, especially here in the United States, we fought the conservatives so that we could have our freedom. Okay, it was the conservatives that were the ones that were wanting to impose taxes on us and all that stuff. So that's the thing that's my take on it. Um, I don't I don't really try to get caught up in political sides. I'm completely against freaking Democrat Republican crap. You know what I mean? I just I despise both of them. I don't really, my thoughts on socialism and things of that nature. Which I love to get into the conversation about socialism, and we'll get into it. But you know, those are my thoughts when it comes to to classic liberalism. And I think if people actually realize that that's what our country was founded on, and it wasn't founded on uh, this new version of liberal, and it wasn't founded on conservatism. It was founded on classical liberalism, the stuff that we've been talking about right here. Okay, and there's been a reason why things have gone to crap. And after we're done with this, I want to get into radicalism and what that really means, because you'll hear these conservatives throwing that word radical around, and they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about.
Well, that term, like several other politically charged terms, have been misused over the last several decades.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's gotten to a boiling point where it's, well, like with the whole thing with the second King James II. You know what I mean? If things boiled over, you know. So, and that's what's happening right now, basically. Um, so hopefully we don't go down that same road, because you guys had a revolution over that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'll be like old John Locke, man. I'll be freaking vindicated in the end, because freaking, you know what I'll be talking about? I'll be talking about classical liberalism, dude. I won't be talking. I won't be talking none of that freaking conservative garbage. Yeah, or
Maybe.
supposed conservative stuff. So now, the I now the secular government thing, when it comes to freedom of religion. That's one thing that I also think is important to bring up too. Not only the fact of keeping separate church from state, but also the freedom of religion. You know what I mean? I think that everybody should have a right to worship their own religion, no matter what it is. But I also believe that those religions need to stay out of government. I don't believe that they have a place in government. I don't know if you've heard about Kentucky forcing people to put Bibles in churches or in hospitals and stuff.
Yeah, there's a recent case, I think there's a case going on in relation to Texas
Mm-hmm.
and libraries and schools.
And everybody keeps bringing up that whole thing about back in the day when we had to do the Pledge of the Allegiance and there was prayers in schools. To me, I believe that was actually illegal. I don't think that the founding fathers would have wanted that to take place. Well, actually, it's up to, actually, let me take that back because school systems, I don't agree with school systems. I believe that communities should have their own schools. And that should have never been a part of freaking government. Now that I think about it, I should really think that one over, rethink that and say that.
Up to a point, I agree with you. But I do see a lot of arguments about community-orientated schools and teaching your own kids in the UK. But there needs to be some sort of level playing field when it comes to what we used to call the 3 R's. Reading, writing and arithmetic. There has to be a sort of standardization when it comes to those more practical.
Damned you and your socialism, Mark Edworthy.
Right? Where you would expect everybody to be able to add one to get together and be able to read.
I heard
to a certain point.
standardize. It was a reflex because I heard the word standardize. Okay, I had to say it.
Okay.
So, but I mean, for me, I've already said it. Being honest, I think that it really comes back to the parents. I don't think that any kind of government law should be forcing children to go to school because, for one thing, these laws, they punish the parents for it, and the thing of the whole issue is a lot of these parents don't even care about their kids' education. They just do it because if they don't, they're going to get in trouble with the law.
Precisely, that's my point. If you've got parents that don't care about education, so no self-taught, no home education, no community education, then there needs to be some sort of regulatory body to step in to make sure that these kids are receiving a suitable level of education.
Well, today I think is showing us more though that that's not really the case. The amount of violence taken in that's being done in school systems at the moment is really, really off the chain. Okay, and these things that are being done it's being done by students who don't really want to be there. You know what I mean?
Okay, there is a difference between the methodology of teaching and just the sheer principle of teaching. I mean, I bet you when you were at school, you could think of really bad teachers.
Oh yeah.
And you can also think of really good teachers. Yeah, I can. But just because there isn't a sort of balanced standard there doesn't mean that education per se is a bad thing.
Well, I mean, this goes back to freedom of thought. You know what I mean? Like it should be the parents' decision and the kid's student decision. If the parents really do care about their kids' education, they should be the ones who say, "Look, you get your butt up and you go to school." And it's not because the government told you to, or you're going to jail.
I am not sure. I'm not sure of the principle. It's the kid's decision. I mean, are you going to ask a 5-year-old if they want to go to school on a nice summer day? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to go down to the local park?
Let's be real. It's usually the parents who put their foot up their kid's butt and say, "Get to school." You know, I mean, that's really where it falls in line. It's like more parents need to take responsibility, in my opinion. You know, rather than having a government agency say, "This is what you're going to do," and if you don't do it, then you'll go. And even if kids don't go to school, we need ditch diggers. There's nothing wrong with people who.
Yeah, but you still need to be able to read and write, even if you're a ditch digger.
Well, they learned how to do things without reading and writing. I mean, it's not like freaking it's a mandatory thing. You get a shovel, you dig a ditch, and people thinks that that's demeaning and everything, but it's not really. Like digging a ditch is actually a pretty noble job. You get out there and try to dig a ditch, I guarantee you. I mean, you're not going to do that good of a job, man. Post hole digger to some people is a PhD, man, and they do a really good job at working with a post hole digger. They should get paid more for their hard work.
It may be true that 100, 200 years ago, it was not necessary for the average population person to need to be able to read and do maths, but in the modern society.
Well, I mean, if people want to go later on when they get a little bit older and they realize how much the real world sucks, yeah, then maybe the government should give them an opportunity to go back to school without charging them money to do so. You know what I mean?
Funny enough, just as I had the opportunity to go to university, it was I was 2 3 years before that before university tuitions were um, paid by the individual rather than paid by taxation.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was, I never actually went to university, but but I could have, in effect, um, receive a university degree. It was still technically free, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Now, with me, I think that school systems could do better if they did, like I said, make it to where it's localized. You know what I mean? I don't agree with even there being like a state educational system. I think that it should be the local areas that govern over their own education. It could be counties, maybe, but I don't go any farther than counties.
Um, Up to a point, aiding and assisting young people into work that is related to the local area, I can see that argument. But again, reading, writing, arithmetic,
Mhm.
I think there should be just a base level sort of playing field.
I don't know. I really don't think that education should be a part of government. Um, this goes back to political tyranny. You know what I mean? If because that's really what it is. Is they're making laws to where they're punishing people because they don't freaking really care about education. They were so glad when they graduated that freaking that was the end of their freaking whole life right there. You know, the wonder years in high school playing football, and the rest of it was going out and getting a 9 to 5 job and taking care of their family.
And the destruction of further education, or the destruction of wanting to seek education after the
Mm-hmm.
school years.
You know, just a horrible, horrible educational system that they're imposing on everybody. That
I mean, like I said, I see just various aspects of US, UK, European education systems that can be changed for the betterment of the individual, but there still has to be a standard, let's say a national standard.
so now, since we covered the religion thing, I want to go to Hugo Grotius. He's another Dutch thinker. Now he came up with the theory of natural law and the rights of individuals in both domestic and international contexts. Now his writings on just war and sovereignty emphasizes that laws exist above rulers and must be respected by all states, which contributed to the liberal notion that laws should bind everyone, even governments. So Grotius argued that all human beings were endowed with reason and social instincts, and from these qualities arose certain moral principles and obligations. Now, these principles, which he called natural law, were universal and unchanging. They existed independently of any government or religious system. According to Grotius, even if there were no divine lawgiver, natural law would still exist because it was grounded in the nature of humanity and the requirements of peaceful coexistence. Now, his ideas provided intellectual tools for defending limited government and rule based order. So, see, this is where we get into the whole area of sovereignty. Um, um, our, we're free according to our conscience. You know what I'm saying? This is supposed to, and he gets into the whole area where, like, I have a tendency of saying this too, and it's something that I need to get away from. But I say it's a God given right, okay? And he goes even further with it. He says that even if there wasn't a God, even if you don't believe in a God, you still have this natural order of things. You know what I'm saying? This natural law that they're universal and unchangeable. You know what I mean? And nobody can take that away from you. And I really like how he did that. When I first heard that, I wanted to start thinking and talking like that, but I keep forgetting about it. You know, because what he's saying there is that freaking no government or religious system whatsoever can take any of these rights away from you. You know, and then it starts getting into you're free according to your own conscience. If you have a feeling that's in your gut when you do something that says, man, that makes you feel guilty, okay, period, then you know you're doing something that's wrong. That's how I see it. Okay, if you're doing something and you know 100% that you don't feel guilty about what you're doing, then you're either doing the right thing or you got mental issues. And if you've got mental issues, don't worry. Somebody else will come along and help you according to the group conscience. You know?
Is is that always true though?
Well, that's the way it's supposed to be set up.
Oh. Yeah.
See, because it's not like your conscience. It's not like the individual conscience. It goes even further. Like when you start voting for politicians, that's supposed to be the sovereignty, which is the group conscience. You know what I mean? So, like, if you break a law and you really don't think that you've done bad, like, say you go out and you steal a car and you had every reason to steal that car in your mind, don't worry, man. Somebody who represents the group conscience is going to come along and they're going to take care of that for you because you're incapable of understanding that what you did was wrong. You know what I mean?
To argue that it's wrong, is it wrong to steal a loaf of bread to feed a starving family?
If you get caught.
That's a bit of a cop-out answer.
Well, that's what everybody else says. You know what I mean? Yeah, you have to go according to your conscience, and then if you get caught, okay, and the people who catch you believe that you did wrong, then you have to respect that because you know that you freaking stole the bread. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you feel guilty about that and you know you've done wrong, then you've done wrong. Okay. If you went and you stole something, would you feel bad about it?
More than likely.
All right. So you see what I mean?
No, I've still anything since I was a kid, but even that was just minor sort of things. But yeah,
That's really what they're getting into. It's you're free according to your own conscience. Nobody can take those freedoms away from you because uh, those are natural laws. They're God given laws. If you're religious, you know what I mean. And no government or no religion can take those rights away from you.
our conscience is subjective.
No.
So if I murdered somebody and I was happy to murder somebody and I didn't feel guilty about it, and if somebody else murdered somebody and they feel guilty about it, yeah, so it's subjective.
Did we just have that 5 minute conversation or not?
Yeah, but again, it's
If
very subjective.
if you go and you kill somebody and you do not feel guilty about it, that means that you are like a sociopath and you feel no emotions. Okay, and how this plays out is you have your conscience, then you have a group conscience. Okay, which is the sovereignty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what happens is because you're a sociopath and you can't differentiate between what's right and wrong, the rest of this great sovereignty is going to come down upon you and they're going to judge you according to their conscience or the conscience of the whole and determine that you are a sociopath. So that will lead you to jails, institution, and possibly death. You see?
Mm.
That's basically the fundamentals. That's how it works, and it goes deeper than that. But that's what I like about this guy. He's the one who really framed this very well. You know what I mean? That's what all of that gets into, and I really do like this. And he's one of the very few people that's never really ever mentioned. He's very, like people always talk about Voltaire. You know what I mean? You listen to these people; they will always talk for hours about Voltaire, but they'll never talk about him. So I really enjoy having a conversation about this guy, him and John Locke. So now let's get on to uh, Montesquieu.
I did double check, and that is, and you using a title rather than the name, the individual.
You wanna go ahead and fill in again?
Again, I did just know. The name is Charles Louis de Secunda, Baron de Labrade et de Montesquieu. So Baron of Breed, and Montesquieu is actually is a commune in a southern region of southwest region of France.
Now he is the one who actually started doing the whole separation of powers in government. Like how you got the parliament, and then you've got the crown, and then you've got the I think you guys call it the high courts, right? And the low courts.
Yeah. Well, that's very simple. That's just, yeah. In the end, yeah.
Now he's the one who came up with that, and he was French. He was a French aristocrat and a theorist. Now that right there is what we call the separation of I'd want to say separation of branches, but I guess or, yeah, I guess it would be.
Yeah.
Separ-
So, yeah, one of the lit
yeah. Now
arms of the state. Yeah.
here in the United States, we do the same thing. Like it's the dividing of the executive, the legislation, and the judicial branches. And the reason why he came up with this concept is because he felt that was to protect individual freedom. You know what I mean? And it would also prevent tyranny, basically. You know, um, which does make sense because you don't want absolute power on one branch of government or one individual. You know what I'm saying? If you have it split up, then that means there's three separate branches working together, which I believe was very, very important.
Or
Now,
at least working together, at least in theory. Like, and
well,
I point out what's happening in the US at this present moment.
I think that what's happening in the United States is going to make more sense when we start getting into the whole story of radicalism, and you'll start seeing more of what's taking place here. I've already mentioned like our crazy ideas about freaking conservatism here, which I was talking about with like constitutional government and what it represents and who founded this country. You know what I mean? Um, but later on, man, we can get into because I wanted to add that in here because especially with France, okay, when it comes to radicalism, people don't understand there's a difference between classical liberalism and radicals. You know, like there's a distinct difference. Radicals,
Didn't we sort of cover this last year?
we didn't cover it in this. What happened was is we had a really really cool conversation because of what's his name off of Skype, not V but Angel.
Okay.
Angel kept always talking about radical this, radical that during the time Trump was running for office, and it kept annoying the hell out of me because he had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. You know what I mean? Um, Like, because today people don't even understand what radical really is. They don't understand what it is. Like, look at the revolution in France, okay, and the beheadings and the amount of people that were freaking murdered in the time of terror. You know what I mean? That was radicalism. You know, and that's not something that France is proud of either. A lot of people might not understand that, but they are not proud of it. You know, they wrote their freaking constitution twice for a reason. You know,
Arguably, the basis of the Constitution is based upon that.
well, no, there's two times that they wrote it, and the
Mm.
first one uh, didn't work out all that well. Which we can get into that here in a little bit. But that there's a reason for that, and that people don't understand. Like, that was radicalism at its birth. That's a direct cause of radicalism. You know, don't get me wrong; these were nobles, but I mean, do you think that it's just for freaking people to freaking hunt down these people and then freaking behead them? You know what I mean?
I don't know. The old saying, you can't make an omelette without cracking a few eggs, comes to mind.
It's a little bit barbaric there, Mark.
Maybe, but that just comes to mind.
Okay, now his central belief was that political power should never be concentrated in the hands of a single person or institution. Instead, it should be divided among separate branches that could check and balance one another. Now, checks and balance is very, very important.
Mm.
You know, I was talking to you, I think, about this, or Mr. Robot, like all this stuff that you hear on the news about the Supreme Court saying this is unconstitutional, it needs to go. That's the thing that people don't understand. Like, the Supreme Court really doesn't have the power to say this is illegal, we're going to stop it. Okay, they interpret the law.
Hmm.
You know, Congress here in the United States creates laws. The Supreme Court interprets the law, and then the executive branch enforces it.
Again, this goes back to my old argument about poorly formed legislation, and due to the poor formation of certain legislation, how it can be interpreted in multiple ways.
Well, see, they messed up with the Supreme Court here in the United States, and I still stand on this. What they did is they created the Department of Justice in the executive branch, and people don't understand what the Department of Justice is. It emulates the Supreme Court. Okay, so you have the Supreme Court with its way of doing their government. Okay, their form of government. The Department of Justice takes and they duplicate that so that they work together. So the Supreme Court says that this is unconstitutional and illegal. Then the Supreme Court uh, hands that decision off to the executive branch, and the Department of Justice then goes and they enforce it. Well, originally it wasn't supposed to be that way. The Supreme Court was supposed to be uh, state driven. Okay, it was like that's how they did things. The police force, the court systems, they all went state by state, and the Supreme Court oversaw that. You know what I mean? So whenever a decision was made by the Supreme Court, it was filtered down into the states and everything. And then whenever the states or individuals like me or Joe Blow had a problem, they could take it to the court system and it can go right up into the Supreme Court. You know, so there was that connection there between the states and the Supreme Court, and they severed it by creating the Department of Justice. They separated the individual and the states from that branch of government, and that's what they're doing. They're using they're doing this kind of stuff to separate the individual and the states from the federal government.
It's sort of the opposite way around in the UK. I think it was Tony Blair again. Tony Blair, surprised how many times that name comes up. That created under his prime ministership. He created the UK Supreme Court. Beforehand, it was just based upon the Department of Justice in effect, based upon precedents.
Mm-hmm. Just duplicating, and that's really you'll find that a lot in government too today. Like they like to come up with resolutions, and then they use duplicates because here in the United States they have to go from state to state, and each state has to vote on this resolution for it to become a federal law. So what they'll do is they'll duplicate that one freaking proposition, and then they'll freaking use it in this state with the name set up for that state, and then they'll duplicate it and use it for another state with that state's name on it, you know?
But in theory, each in UK Parliament, each politician is representing their own constituency.
Mm-hmm.
So similar sort of concepts, but it's not. There's before devolution, it was just based upon a sort of singular sort of concept throughout the let's say 3 countries, because Northern Ireland's always been somewhat different. But since devolution, in certain areas, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland do have some significant differences.
Okay, so I'm wanting to get on to the big mouth. You know who I'm talking about? I'm talking about the big mouth Voltaire. You can't tell me he wasn't a big mouth. He was. He was very big mouth. Everybody knows. If you don't know that Voltaire was a big mouth, then I'm here to tell you Voltaire had a big mouth. He was fierce. In today's modern millennial wording, he was very fierce, ladies and children. Like he was real big on. He was a critic of absolute monarchy and religious intolerance. Basically, he believed in freedom of speech and religion. He didn't think that it was anybody's right to take those things away from us, just like we were just now talking about. You know what I mean? Now, like I said before, I think that he was more abstract, you know what I mean, than what he really was at actually like contributing intellectually. But I believe that he was one of those people who spoke out and really. He was a mover, you know what I mean? Basically, he was a mover and a shaker, basically, in my opinion at least. But he argued that when individuals were free to express their thoughts, society could progress through dialogue, criticism, and exchange of ideas. He did not view disagreement or offense as dangers to be suppressed, but as natural results of living in a diverse and open community. Okay? So no matter how much we disagree with one another, we should be able to respect each other's opinion because we live in a world that's free and it's open to everybody's points of view, not just one point of view or the other point of view. You know what I mean? That's why whenever I look at these protesters in LA, I don't see anything different from them and the J6ers. You know what I'm saying? Because it's to me the same thing. Now, people have been calling them insurgents on both sides. Okay. And I personally see this as people who were protesting and they got carried away. And you can call little bits and pieces here and there riots, whatever. I think that things got carried away in the heat of the moment, and that's all it was. You know what I mean? I when I first first heard about that riot or that protest in LA, I thought that there was a real riot, dude. Because I remember the '90s. I remember the riots back then. That was a real riot. You know what I mean? And there was quite a few people who got murdered in that riot. And I went and I checked it out, and it was like, no, these are just people who got carried away. So
what is the dividing line between somebody getting carried away in the moment and a riot?
When Watts is on fire, when LA is on fire,
well, certain parts of LA were on fire.
No, there wasn't. They put a freaking a Tesla. It was one of those Tesla cars out in the middle of the street and set it on fire, dude. I think they did it twice. That was it. I went on there. I went on there and watched the live cam view of it, and it was like I was telling. Who was it I was telling? I think I told Jaffe. But I went on there and I watched, and all it was a bunch of cops sitting around by their squad cars, waiting for something to happen. And like there was a plastic bag that was flowing in the wind as it went by the camera, and then it came back again, and then it came back again, and that was the only action that was taking place. You know what I mean? This was like at 8 o'clock at night their time.
Sorry, you just made me think about plastic bag being the new euphemism for the old tumbleweed.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking when I seen it. I was like, dude, that's like a tumbleweed in the old West, like Tombstone in the old tumbleweed goes rolling by, But it's true. That was all I saw there. There was a squad car with a couple of girls that were lined up, and they had those wrist things around their backs. And that was it. And they were getting ready to ship them.
There was destruction of property, even if it was only 2 cars, and it probably was a lot more than just 2 cars. But there was destruction of property.
There was destruction of property in the Capitol building too. I mean, do you want to call them insurrectionists because they got carried away and started damaging the Capitol building?
Arguably, if you want to put it on such a basic level, yeah.
I mean, I remember getting out of a Metallica concert and a whole swarm of us teenagers walking down to Circle K, and we were all hyped up from the concert. We went right into Circle K, man. We just stole shit like you wouldn't believe. We come out of that freaking place. I mean, a whole herd of freaking teenagers coming out of a rock concert, hyped up. We just went right inside that store, stole everything, and left, man. You know what I mean?
So technically, did you not create a riot?
That was the heat of the moment. Everybody was freaking hyped up, and we did wrong. I'm not denying that. You know what I mean? And thank goodness the statute of limitation is up, because I would have never said that.
You just confessed.
I mean, but you have to think about things on these levels and stop getting caught up in this political party crap. You know what I mean? Because they're just perpetuating things and they're not thinking on a clear freaking level. You know what I mean? Um, and I believe that this right here is exactly one thing that's needed today. You know what I mean? Um, just people need to understand that it's okay to freaking disagree. It's okay to argue. It's okay to freaking have protests and not agree with one another. That's what freedom is.
But when protests go into, like I said, the destruction of property,
We'll go back to sovereignty. We'll go back to the conscience. If you are incapable, according to your own conscience, to know what right and wrong is, then the sovereignty, the group conscience, will come in and quickly remind you.
so if the group conscience states that your actions is a riot, therefore it must be a riot.
Right. Right.
Mm, yeah,
I
therefore
mean,
sort of does damage to your own argument, doesn't it?
nobody has said that it's a riot. The only people that are saying that it's a riot is conservatives. The only people that said that January the 6th was an insurgent was the freaking conservatives.
Yeah, but are they not a group
Or not the
conscious?
conservatives, not the conservatives, but the Democrats.
Well, but
No,
still, are they not a
we
group conscience?
we are all the group conscience, dude. Every individual is the group conscience, and that's represented in the law. It's not represented by our political parties. Okay, our political parties are just parties that were created by individuals to create groups of the same.
Okay, so you're talking on the principles of the so-called 12 good men argument.
Not the government.
Yeah, group consciousness when it comes to judgment.
Mhm. When you've got the three branches, you got the judicial, you got Congress, which is you got the I always call it Congress, and I forget what they are, what branch they are. You have the executive, the um, judicial, and then you have the commercial. And then you have Congress there. I'm just gonna say it like that. But the but the whole thing of it is that is our that's our group conscience. We vote for these people to be put in office. We vote for um, them to make decisions on our behalf. You know what I mean? So no matter what, we have to abide by what their decisions are because we voted them in. So we relinquish a little bit of our rights, or in my opinion, a lot of our rights, so that they can make decisions for us. That has nothing to do with the political parties whatsoever. The political parties are actually like-minded people who created these parties that are not a part of the government, and that's one thing that I have an issue with when it comes to voting. All right, um, but that's not a part of the government.
Don't you elaborate on that?
Voting has in the United States has nothing to do with government offices whatsoever. It has nothing to do with representatives, you know what I mean, things of that nature. This is
Yeah, representatives voted in based upon mandates.
they have mandates according to the Constitution. Like you're supposed to be an American citizen if you're wanting to be, um, if you're or you're supposed to be naturally born American citizen if you want
Yeah,
to be
no, so I
president.
mean mandates that those parties or those politicians create themselves. So if you've got a politician that says stating that they will fill in all the potholes in your street. That's man-made.
Oh, promises. No, those are
Man-made.
promises. We don't. They're not obligated to do any of those things. They can promise all they want, but when they get into office, they don't really have to do anything at all. So, like we don't hold them according to government freaking standards. If you don't do this, then you forfeit and you go to jail. You know what I mean? We don't do that.
But I've seen quite a few arguments in relation to this, as far as the current Labour government and UK, in relation, such as the argument that the Labour Party came into power based upon no increasement in taxation, even though we are now paying more taxation than anywhere else in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Percentage level.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like here in the United States, we pay more taxes than what you folks imposed on us that caused us to go into war for our freedom. Isn't that amazing? Like we are literally getting taxed more now than what we went to war over.
Yeah, we've seen this is the heaviest, this this is more tax in the UK. We pay more tax than we did during World War II.
That's great. Yeah. So with Voltaire, according to him, he said he believed that suppressing diverse and open conversations and stuff like that, and free speech. He believed it created ignorance, it encouraged conformity, and it gave unchecked power to those people in authority. You know what I mean? So, like, if you suppress free speech, first of all, you're going to make everybody ignorant because nobody's allowed to speak up and speak their mind. And ignorance isn't stupidity. Ignorance is just not knowing. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's something that I think I even mentioned last year. You know, there's a difference between being ignorant and being stupid. You know, stupid is knowing that you're doing something and still doing it. You know what I mean? And ignorance is just not knowing that you're doing something.
Actually, I prefer the more ignorance versus arrogance concept, rather than calling it stupid, call it arrogant.
I love calling people stupid, though. See that?
Do you like calling people arrogant?
And plus, like, encouraging conformity is what Voltaire had a problem with. He didn't like the idea of conforming to a certain way. You know what I mean? Like the Truman Show. Remember that? Where in the morning, every time he got up, everybody backed out of the driveway at the same time, and they drove down the road, and the lights always changed for him so that he could get to work. You know.
To quote doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd.
Mm-hmm. And I really agree with him about unchecked power to authority too. So now he ridiculed that the abuse of power by church and state. He ridiculed the abuse of power by church and state, and his wit and publications helped popularize Enlightenment values among broader audiences. Now, Enlightenment is something after we get through with radicalism that I'd like to go into, because I want to take a really good look at that, and I want to point out things that a lot of people don't catch on to. Like, you'll hear people always talking about being being a realist. I'm a realist. I'm a realist. And they really have absolutely no clue what the word realist is and where it came from. You know,
Just on the point of states and religion, you can have religion, such as the UK is heavily sort of culturally Christian. You can have religion to guide legislation, to guide the concepts of the state. But when you get to a much more, where you get to a much more theologic sort of state, as we see in certain parts of, let's say, the Middle East at the moment, you that's where the danger becomes obvious.
I think if you look at it like this, if you allow any religion to creep its way into government, then you allow all religions to creep its way into government.
Even when those religions have a contradictory sort of stance
No, I mean,
between each other.
if you allow Christian beliefs to dictate government, then you open up a doorway to where freaking the Muslims can come in and dictate government too in that same government. So
Maybe in the modern world, and let's remember the US is quite a young country, but in Europe, in Britain, we've had a sort of Christian Orthodox
we,
for the last thousands of years.
we would have to really look at the English government again and find out if you guys really did have very much of a freaking constitutional government. You know what I mean? Because everything moved pretty quick with how things worked with that government. Like now, when it comes to like labor, and it comes to the how it came to be, and then socialism in England, I'm completely amazed with some of the things that happened there. You know what I mean? And then like it goes the same way here in Europe as well. Like a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now is the way government should have been done in Europe. All right, these are people in Europe that freaking brought these ideas up and formed these governments, and they were constitutional governments. Okay, and the stuff we're talking about is stuff that was supposed to be happening in Europe, and it's supposed to be happening in England. Okay, but how much of it is being actually done today? You know what I mean? How many of these laws have just disappeared because they came up with their own ideologies that pertain to socialism and all of that cool new hip updated stuff that people love to.
Well, not so cool,
Yeah,
even on the point of view.
you know. So I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to really take another look at what's going on, and then say, look, this is the way they wanted it, and this is the way it turned out. And you guys didn't really embrace the whole liberal, classical liberal thing, like you did other things, because like you got to remember. Conservatism in England was a big deal. It really was, because you were breaking away from the Tories, and the Tories are just they're just horrible bastards, bunch of chicken thieves, according to the
The
Irish.
real Tories rather than what we now call Tories. Remember, Tories is just a synonym for conservatives. No.
I don't know, man.
Well, in English, sort of.
The Irish say the Tories are a bunch of chicken thieves.
Yeah, yeah, you're looking at it on an historical point of view. It is quite common to find people use the term Tories just as a synonym for conservatives now.
And you don't find that as a problem. Like, you don't think that there should be a distinction between the two, as because I
Mm,
know you're conservative. I mean, don't you think that there should be a distinction?
yeah, yeah.
Because the Tories were horrible. I mean, they really were. They were horrible. And then when the conservatives broke away from them, I mean, that caused a lot of issues in England. You know.
Mm. But again, I'm just looking at it from a sort of modern perspective.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a different situation with England than what it is with the rest of us. You know what I mean? Because England conservatism was on the rise at the at a time at that certain time period too. Maybe a little bit later than liberalism, but there was always that distaste between classic liberals and those damn Tories. They hated because they were loyalists. They were loyal to the crown.
Mm.
You know, it's pretty interesting.
Mm.
And we honestly weren't able to get through too much of all that stuff. So this second part is or this last one. I think Jean-Baptiste Say is the one that we should end on because I think this is the one that you like the most. You're gonna love him because he was a French economist, and I know you love economies.
Okay, if you say so.
Just let me go ahead and put it out there then about Jean-Baptiste Say. Now, he was a French economist, and he was instrumental in shaping classical liberal views on markets and entrepreneurship, being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
He expanded on ideas originally introduced by Adam Smith, arguing that production drives economic demands and that free markets unleash innovation and prosperity. Now, I'm okay with the whole concept that what he says there, innovation and prosperity, but I still have doubts when it comes to this whole area of free market. You know what I mean? Because, you know, what the average person thinks of as free market isn't really free market. You know what I mean? You think free market is you go down the street, you make a deal with your neighbor for freaking, he sells this amount of eggs, and you pay for it. But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about like free trade and setting prices and things of that nature. You know what I mean? Export, import.
Again, on your concept, you still got that. I can still either go to my local supermarket or my local butcher, my local baker, or my local candlestick maker, if there's such a thing anymore. And I can pick up bakers. I can pick up bread from multiple different companies.
I mean, that's theoretically a good thought, but I mean, what do you know of that's being restricted from being brought into the store that you're going to? You know, I mean, well, for example, vitamins. That's a big deal in England right now. You know, how many restrictions does your country have on vitamins being sold in the UK at the moment?
Uh, are we talking on safety level, or are we talking?
Any level,
I
any.
mean, in the US, you get this situation where you've got advertisements of drugs and medical or pharmaceutical drugs that may have really bad effects, side effects.
I'm talking about vitamins.
Again, I stay fairly healthy. I don't actually take any vitamin supplements myself.
Well, supplements would be a better term, actually. That would
Because I try to live quite healthily anyway.
Supplements would be a better term, though. I'm glad you said that because that covers a lot more than just vitamins. You know what I mean? So, I mean, when it comes to that, that's just one example. You know what I mean? Like if I wanted to buy a car from frickin' Iran, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Um, they've got a few cars and trucks that are banned from being sold here in the United States. I just recently.
Dude, that's Iran, even other automotive.
Well, that was just an example.
Yeah, yeah, I was just thinking.
That was just an example, but there like vehicles. There's vehicles that are banned from being sold here in the United States.
Hmm.
You know, but this is supposed to be an open market.
Yeah, but you still need vehicles to be of a sort of safe standard.
Oh, that's according
I
to
mean, you don't want to buy a
according to the government standard.
take what's the famous Chinese company that's producing all these extremely cheap electric vehicles? Can't remember what beacons would be, but yeah, you'd want to buy your next electric vehicle and find that it's going to explode as soon as you take it out of your driveway.
Like the Tesla vehicles do here in the United States.
Mm.
How many Teslas have you seen catch on fire in your lifetime?
I see very few Teslas. Remember, there isn't a major appetite.
I mean, on TV, even not like.
Again, I don't watch that much mainstream news. I do actually follow a politically led sort of car YouTube channel. I do hear stories.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you've heard of at least more than one Tesla car catching on fire. I know of at least four of them that I can remember. There was that one that was in the drive or in the actual parking lot of a freaking, I think it was a grocery store. They just got out of the car to go in and freaking get something. They come back out and their freaking car is on fire. That happened right here in the United States, man. It wasn't a vehicle that was shipped over from freaking some third world country. You know what I mean? It was right here in the United States.
Is China a third world country?
Well, Tesla's not made in China, are they?
Do they not get component? Where are the batteries produced?
That's a good question. That is a good question. So,
I mean, sure, the entire car may not be packaged, put together in China, but that doesn't mean each component isn't.
now, here is the kicker. This is the kicker. All right. For people who like to call themselves conservatives, they need to think about this. Okay. Now, Jean-Baptiste is the one who was the economist when it comes to economics. Okay. Now, you need to understand that this man was the one who came up with the liberal interpretation of freaking of capitalism. Okay, capitalism and economic liberty is what they pushed. That was where that came from. So, like when you think about capitalism, you should think about it as more of a classical liberalist way of looking at things. Because if you'd remember when last year when we were even talking, conservatives were the ones who were big on tariffs. Where in England, remember, they were the ones on tariffs, whereas the Labor Party was the ones who were always trying to push the idea that tariffs were bad for the economy and it caused unemployment and shortage of work. You know, so.
Okay.
But
I'm not sure if I can agree with that argument because tariffs, in theory, and we're seeing it in the US at this present moment with certain companies, such as I gave you a couple of examples a couple of weeks ago, Apple and Nvidia, bringing in production plants back into the US.
mm-hmm.
So, in theory, the tariffs aided in bringing jobs back home.
Well, that's because they're afraid of the money that they're going to have to pay.
Mm.
You see, it was like that. That's just fear based. That has nothing to do with open markets. It has nothing to do with capitalism or economic liberties. It doesn't have anything to do with innovation or prosperity. It has to do with being afraid of all that extra money you're going to be charged because you were freaking having people make something in Mexico.
But I don't know. You could argue that China has gone through their polystriker, or are going through the polystriker sort of movement at the moment, and have been for the last, I don't know, 40 odd years, and for certain sets of people. In China, it has not aided. In fact, it has caused much more minimal problems.
Well,
I'm thinking the Uyghur population as an example.
the thing is you're talking about a communist state.
Yeah. Okay. Let's use another example. India. Granted, they've got a very sort of strict caste system,
Mm-hmm.
but they are a very financially, well, I won't say financially independent because they're anything but financially independent, but they're a fairly financially strong country.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you're seeing a lot of poverty still in that country.
So, I mean, can you actually tell me what forms of government they have? To be honest, what actually is India when it comes to governments? I mean,
In theory, they are democracy. They are democracy, but they've got an issue with corruption. They've had a serious issue of corruption ever since Britain pulled out back in the 50s.
well, I mean, that was probably where they got their problems from because there was
Arguably, the issue of corruption has been going for back centuries.
a long way back in India.
Yeah. So it's really a sort of self.
They call that systemic. It's a systemic issue that just won't go away. It's kind of like Chicago here in Illinois. You know what I mean? If you want extra voters, go to Illinois and have some Chicago voters from the grave vote for you. And
Well, that's a fairly new phenomenon.
no, it actually started. It actually started over 100 years ago with Chicago because they're infamous for them using dead voters. to win elections, and ever
Uh,
since.
I've only been aware about it for the last 10, 15 years. So
That's where the whole voter fraud from the Conservative Party here in the United States originally started from, is because it evolved from how corrupt these horrible Democrats in Illinois are. You know what I mean? It was like, and it is true. It did happen. I'm not taking it away from them. It did happen. They were still in votes that way, but that's how it all started. So, well, I think we did a good job here. I think after Benjamin Constant is the next one we should start out on. He's the one you'll like, because I don't know if you recognize the name or not. He's from France.
yeah, yeah. Again, a name I've not heard in a long time, but yeah, it is a name.
Yeah, he's the one that started more of your guys's. About, yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, he's the one who started up your form of government over in England. Basically, he came up with the ideas of a monarchical kind of liberal or constitutional government. You know what I mean, with a monarchy and a constitutional government. So
You mean as in the monarchies in theory overlooking, acting as the last sort of
he had
bastion?
yeah, he has he advocated for constitutional monarchy,
Mm.
and
As in the monarch's job is to look after, to protect the nation, or to look after the nation, and to look after the citizenry of the nation. I mean, there's this concept that um, everybody, the monarch's there to create serfdom. But it can be argued that monarchs are there to actually protect
their people.
the nation.
Well, that's basically the way your guys' constitutional government is set up, even though it doesn't appear that way. You know what I mean? Because you take a look at, like, well, Mr. Robot, if he was on here, he could talk to you about how horrible his country's constitution is, how freaking the queen or king has the sovereignty and all that, and that's because that's the king and queen's responsibility, is to make sure that those colonies are protected.
Yeah, but I've made this argument quite a few times before. These days, within the last, I don't know, arguably 100 years, if not more, the monarch's job now is to say bureaucratic sort of rubber stamping job.
Mm-hmm. Actually, he's the one also that kind of goes into making the distinction between like the old ancient philosophy of liberty and what we consider liberty today. So he's the one that later when we come back. Oh, we come back on, we can kind of get into that. That would be a perfect way of starting. Yeah. So, because he actually makes a good point on that too, and a lot of the stuff he talks about. So, I say we should end it here and then come back and start out with Benjamin Constant, the big man himself, episode 2. Benjamin Constant, man from France, who had the big pants.
Did he have big pants?
He probably did. He was from France.
Actually, from what century are we talking about?
I think it was the 1700s.
So we're talking about the macaroni sort of fashion. So yeah, big pants. Yeah.
Big pants. Yeah. So before we go, let everybody know how they can reach you, Mr. Edworthy.
Okay, I can be found mainly at minds.com, so minds.com/Medworthy.
Right. And with me, you can find me at minds.com too, is Roger_Hanson. I am also on X at Roger Hanson at ROGLOL1973. As you know, I'm on Rumble. I am on X. I'm also streaming on Twitch, Kick, YouTube, and on DLive. You can go into DLive and contact me directly on chat anytime if I'm not streaming or if I am streaming. My name there is Roger_Hanson, like it is on Minds. On Kick, I am also Roger_Hanson. And this is on YouTube as The Praetorian, where you can find me at The Praetorian 5222. The Praetorian at The Praetorian 5222. Twitch, it's always infamous 1969, and that's the way it's always going to be. Infamous OG 1973. That's me, yo. So,
like I say, you unify your channel names. Just gets confusing after a while.
The reason why I said that is because on Rumble, you will find me at Roger Hanson, or Roger Hanson at infamous OG 1973. So, if you guys like the episode tonight, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, not just in the chat, but also in the comment section, guys. That you don't realize how important that really is. It's very important to not just the platform showing that we are an active freaking channel, but it's also important because we actually like to have conversations.
It's important because of our souls.
That's right. That's right. And we really do like having conversations in the chat section. So stop by and check us out there. You can also check us out on Element Matrix at Live with Roger Hanson. You can also check us out on we're on Teams too, but I just don't really like using Teams as a reference. But
because we only really use that for one. No, used to use that with Jaffe. So
for
we
two things.
Use that for specific purposes.
Right. So we are on Teams. We just don't really like going there. We like Element Matrix. So you guys, if you're on there, check us out. You know, it's a pretty cool place to go and hang out. And we will be there all the time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the show. You want to say bye to everybody, Mark?
Goodbye from him.
Okay.
And goodbye from me.